Hello Hastings, I'm Tom Wright. Welcome to another In Studio. Today we have Senator Karla Bigham here in studio for the first time, I believe now.
Yeah, thank you, Tom.
Welcome.
Thank you.
We are here because it is the end of the very first session for Senator Bigham. You may remember she was in that special election held in January that got her in her seat pretty quickly, and you got to go to action pretty quickly.
Yeah,
after the election, huh?
You know, right in February after I was elected, we started session a few days later, and so been going ever since.
Going ever since. So we're going to hear all about, get your thoughts for everybody, and talk about some of the key issues that went before the Senate and the House and legislation overall. And you know, and you served a couple terms in the House.
Absolutely.
From 2007 to 2011.
Correct.
So I'm very curious to get your take on the comparison, you know, your time there and the time this last session,
You know, it's a common question. It's a good question.
Yeah.
I would say that it's changed a lot, and probably not for the good. There's a lot more partisan, a lot more toxic, and I think it has to do with the process. And I just really feel if people respect the process, then I think that decorum will change, that partisanness will change. You know, for example, getting a near 1,000-page omnibus bill with everything in it from agriculture to, you know, workforce development, probably not a good way to assure transparency and restore confidence in a process when you stuff everything into one bill and tell people to read it within about 90 minutes. So that kind of stuff, I think, has to change. And I think the way we do that is having some of the rank and file folks say we're not going to do that and we're not going to do that process. So hopefully when we get back in January, you know, we'll have a discussion with the majority party to say, well, we don't like that. So
well, while we're on that topic of that 990-page omnibus bill, what do you feel the governor is going to do with that? Is he going to veto, or is he going to?
You know, it's hard to say. I think so, and it's certainly unconstitutional. With in the state of Minnesota, we have in our constitution a single subject matter requirement, and so when the title of the bill is 5 pages long, it tells you a little bit that there's more than one subject in it, and so. It's hard to say whether he'll veto it or not. I think he's indicated he is going to, but he's also going to take his time in a session that ends in an even year. It's a sine die. It ends the biennium, if you will, and he gets a little bit more time to decide what he's going to do. He gets 14 days. So bills that are passed in the last 3 days, he gets 14 days to decide their fate.
Okay.
So.
Well, let's talk about, let's hit a bill that was that involved Hastings, a bonding bill. I know the governor asked for $1.5 billion in new projects, and then the Republicans, they asked for $825 million, which a lot of it cuts to higher education and some other projects. But I know Hastings and Cottage Grove, I think both had some projects in.
Yep, so the bonding bill ended up being $825 million plus additional money in legacy funding with bonds. I don't know if that's going to make it, because it's a different way of financing things, and so that could be problematic. But the Hero Center, which is a public safety training center located in the city of Cottage Grove, and which I was the chief author of, and then also the Smart Center, which will be in Inver Grove for Dakota County. That is a public safety training facility really dealing with mental health and training and kind of a triage area. Those both made it, and I'm very proud of that. I'm very excited about that. I think that's, you know, in the Senate, we didn't have one project for public safety, not one. And I just would not vote for a bill that didn't have, you know, something for public safety in it. And so, you know, I made that clear and did not, the first time around, I did not vote for it. And then they kind of saw the way that we probably should have a couple public safety things in there, and they put it in there, and I did vote for it. They also had some provisions in there for Seidel's Lake, which is South St. Paul. I did have a bill for the City Hall here for Hastings for restoration, and that never received a hearing in the Senate. I requested it, and they never gave it to me.
Okay.
It also was not in the House. I know that Representative Juergens was carrying it in the House for us, and it wasn't in their bill either. And so when there's a finite amount of money and bonding, you know, they do make decisions, and I don't sit on the committee.
Sure.
So I know that Representative Juergens does, but It just wasn't, when you're dealing with a finite amount of money, they make the decisions and then the bill comes forward. So
I see.
The committee makes the decisions.
The committee, of course. On to another item, a piece of legislation was that got kind of forced on you guys, you could say, with gun regulation, in regards to gun regulation with the tragedy at Parkland in Florida there that happened.
Now the one in Texas.
Right, and
So,
now the one in Texas.
yeah.
I think, Parkland was February 14th,
Sure.
right around the start of the session there. I know there's some protests and there's some talk of it regulation going on. Could you explain what happened in the session, if anything?
Nothing.
Yeah.
And nothing did. And it was one of the more frequent emails that I would receive. I have a carry permit. I own firearms. I'm a Second Amendment supporter. But we cannot have these tragedies be the norm. We just cannot. And that's not going to be acceptable. And so to work on, I had a bill with Representative Frankie on school threat assessment teams. And what that would do is it would bring groups together, and there are other states that have these, Tom, and it deals with school administration, police, counselors, mental health folks, and they work together in the schools and making sure that our students are safe. If there are threats, that they kind of are looking more proactively. And for example, the Parkland situation, the school had expelled the individual, and then the local law enforcement also knew some things, but they weren't, and the FBI knew some, they just weren't talking. So these teams allow for that. And they also work with the county attorney's office and everything. So that did not, I believe it's in the supplemental bill, that the big omnibus bill, that did not go on its own. I think one of the things you maybe heard a lot was that the governor wanted these provisions to be sent on their own as a standalone versus in a big omnibus bill. And that didn't happen because I think school safety and actually increasing some of the gun safety laws is bipartisanly supported. I mean, you saw provisions that were, Representative Frankie authored some provisions as well, and he's a Republican. There is a bipartisan desire to work on these, but for some reason the NRA and the majority party just did not move any of the gun safety provisions. But school safety, there is some money in some of the provisions, but again, if they don't get signed into law because they're in a big old omnibus bill, right, that's problematic.
I see. And
so just to send a bill to a governor with a Christmas tree with all these ornaments on it, if you will, and then he vetoes it, it's a more political ploy than wanting to get at results. And that's unfortunate, and I don't think the people want that.
Next item, the sexual harassment. I know it was, there's big headlines. 2 state lawmakers resigned. One that
that I replaced.
That you replaced. Senator Dan Schoen and Representative Tony Cornish. Tell us what happened legislative-wise with sexual harassment. 'Cause I know there was some legislation that was attempted, and there's there's a sticking point with, I believe, it was the Chamber of Commerce on that.
Yeah, nothing happened with that either.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate. Again, the chamber really had some objections, and
what were they objecting to? What was it?
I think it had to do with clarity and expectations. I think, and I do believe actually some of the local governments wanted additional clarity too. So I'm hoping that we'll come back and next session and even work on it in the interim on it. We tried to bring it forward. The House actually passed it, the bill that was sent over to us, but we never took it up in the Senate, and then they just never moved it in the process in the Senate. And so that's unfortunate because people deserve, a safe working environment and a transparent process that includes due process, when wrongdoing does occur. And so we do have to keep making these improvements in these efforts.
I see. Minimum wage was another one. I understand Republicans introduced some bills to create a tip credit, something like that.
I believe that was withdrawn in the overall in the overall bill as one of the. It was cited as one of the objections the governor had on it. So one of the things that I'm very surprised that did not make it forward, because it was probably the #1 email. Do you want to take a guess at what it is? Distracted driving.
Oh yeah.
That did not make it at all. And I am shocked that it didn't. I have a bill to increase the penalties for criminal vehicular homicide if it's resulting from, being on a phone, from being distracted by a phone. Nothing passed. And that was very bipartisanly supported, but the Republican leadership decided not to move it in either the House or the Senate. And I would say this year that was probably the top email that I received from constituents.
And what was their explanation on that? Why they didn't want to move it?
They didn't really give one. They said there just wasn't time. But we had 12 weeks, and for the first 10 weeks, we passed 1 or 2 bills in the first 10 weeks, which was weird because you asked me what had changed from the House into the Senate. I don't ever recall a time where a session you waited almost 10 weeks to really start hearing some of the calendar bills. Like the ones that have made it all the way through the committee process and are usually passed unanimously, and they go very fast. We didn't start doing that till almost 10 weeks into session. And so for the first 10 weeks, we had only passed and sent the governor 3 bills, and I was very confused at why we would not be working more bills through the process, because there was time. So I'm not sure why they didn't really give an explanation other than saying they ran out of time. And it's an important issue. I mean, it's something that I hear about just being at, Emily's Bakery, or Wyatt's or Spiral Brewery. People do talk about that, and they wonder why that didn't advance, because it's bipartisan. And I think one of the frustrations with folks is, I think they understand, Tom, that if a Democrat and a Republican want to debate tax policy, probably not going to agree, right? Or maybe some other social issues that Democrats and Republicans don't agree on. And that's okay. We're going to have a healthy, respectful dialogue and debate. But when there are issues that we're all on board, let's go, we're going to be unified, we should be. And so that's why it's very confusing to me, is when we can get along and when we can agree, why not just move it along the process? But they didn't.
So distracted driving is one hot topic that you see emails on. What else have you heard from constituents?
The emergency money for schools was another one that towards the end, that was probably brought up maybe 2 weeks ago, the last 2 weeks of session. And people really responded to that because people's property taxes are going up because the state isn't keeping up with the school funding, the growth, and the inflation. And there's a real threat of class sizes increasing and getting that less individual attention, and then also some of the teachers, being laid off. South Washington County Schools, if that emergency funding would have passed, would have received about $2.7 million. Hastings School District would have received over $600,000. And it's one-time money, I get that, but we're also in a budget year next year. And so the final tax bill that was sent had an education attachment to it, which again, if we talk about the single subject rule, tax policy, education, financing, they're not similar. And so again, I think there could be problems there with that. But more importantly, it's one-time money out of the reserve. And then they do some shifting or hoping that in the environmental school trust fund, the school trust fund gets some money in it and pays the rest of it. So it's just kind of very convoluted and kind of a gimmick. And I don't think taxpayers appreciate that, and voters appreciate the gimmicks. You have a $329 million surplus. Why are you taking money out of a reserve? I don't think people would that run businesses, run their business that way. When you have a surplus, you don't go tap your reserves. So I don't see why we'd be doing government that way.
Well, let's get people caught up to where we're at now. So again, it's a 990-page omnibus bill.
Correct.
That's as before the governor.
Yes.
Correct. And he has until when to decide to yay or nay it?
Well, that was 2 weeks, 14 business days, I believe, from Saturday or from Sunday. Yep.
Okay.
So from Sunday. Yep.
Okay. The end of the session. Okay. All right. What's next for you? What are you going to be up to now?
I'm going to be all through the community here this summer. I've got Rivertown Days and a lot of different events. And we have Memorial Day coming up, and there's events for that. So it's just really going to continue to meet with business owners and organizations, the schools, and just talking with folks, building those relationships so that I can be the best state senator for this area possible.
Can you share any top secrets you might have in store for the next session? Do you have anything on the agenda yet?
You know, I think that's a budget year, so that's gonna really, those secrets will become more apparent when we see what our forecasts look like. You know, Tom, it's really going to be interesting to see if the tax bill gets signed, because you know, that's going to be problematic for people that are filing taxes next year. And you know, we'll have $329 million, right, if it gets vetoed. So that falls to the bottom line. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. But you know, I think there's some real good reform issues that we can take a look at. You know, one of the things that didn't make it through was Met Council reform, and you know, I have a spot for local government near and dear in my heart, because I'm a two-time local elected official, former city council member and former county commissioner. The Met Council reform, I think, is something that I'd like to see if I couldn't help get some resolution on, because there needs to be some reform, but you can't just kind of poke the bear. You know, the governors, and then Tim Pawlenty or Mark Dayton have not liked the ideas of reform. So let's see if we can't maybe get a bipartisan group and move something along. That might be something I'll work on next year as well.
Well, there you go.
So,
for anybody interested to get a hold of you or keep up to date with you, how can they do so?
Well, social media. So we have Facebook and Twitter. You know, go ahead and like the page. I put up a lot of different things going on in the district. Also email and phone number. So feel free to call. Obviously going to be in and out of the office, you know, here in the interim and around town. So happy to hear from you. I want to hear from you. It makes my job easier.
Great. Well, thank you so much again.
Thank
Welcome
you.
again to the studio.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here. There you go, Senator Karla Bigham. You're a senator for District 54 for Hastings, Cottage Grove, and the surrounding areas. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.